call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, a definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. We have a special episode for you today. As you all know, tour just happened, dwindling down. A lot of people might have post-tour depression. I seem to have what I like to call happy that it happened in retrospect instead of post-tour depression, because I'm just on cloud nine that we've still gotten all these amazing shows. And one of the amazing shows, and if you looked at social media, you might have seen I made a top 8 list. And I believe I had the Fort Worth Night 2 show at either number 2 or number 3. Very, very high. I really like this show. And there's one reason that really made it stick out above everything else. Not Undone, not Brandon J that I obviously missed. You probably know that story, but not Brandon J. It was the speech that Ed made towards the end of the night, where he reads a poem from the poet laureate of Dallas, Texas. Just this wonderful, vulnerable, impassioned story about his life and what Pearl Jam had meant to him when times were really, really difficult. And amazing to kind of see in that like whole sequence of 5 to 10 minutes where he reads this poem, and then you get to see Joaquin come on stage and start dancing and celebrating the moment with Ed. It's a real beautiful thing. And it's something that Pearl Jam tries to make happen as much as they can, but you know, you can never replicate something like this. So today we have something very special for you. We are going to have on our show, hold on. I'm going to try this. I've been working on it. Zihuatanejo.
Joaquin Zihuatanejo.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So today we are going to be interviewing Joaquin Zihuatanejo. Wonderful. We cannot wait to talk to him, and we cannot wait for him to tell a story. So we're just going to get into it. Randy Sobel over here, John Farrar over there.
Yep.
So what are you excited about? What do you want to talk about today?
I want to talk about Pearl Jam.
I was asking John. I wanted to give you a big lead in.
Oh, okay.
That's
John,
okay. No, spoiler alert. He's here. This is how you start a podcast, everyone. Joaquin, thank you.
He's our distinguished guest. That's who the people want to hear from. They can hear from me every week.
Right. Again, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. This is so cool just to have you here, and we're all on video chat and we all get to see each other's face light up and laugh and everything like that. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
John, do you have a top 5 list of shows from this last tour as well?
I have not. I want to go back and hear all the bootlegs first, because it's hard getting the live streams and everything. But as far as moments go, like that moment when Ed read that whole thing that you wrote, just like that was one of the best moments for me of the whole tour. Cause like that was not a short piece that you did. He took a lot of time out of the show to do that. And you know that he only does that when it's something that's very meaningful, very powerful. I just want to start with like, how much did you know ahead of time what was going to happen?
Oh my goodness. That's the beginning of all of this is where it all started. All cards on the table. I have to tell the truth because I'm a poet. I was not going to the Wednesday show or the Friday show because I was scheduled to be out of town, working with high school students on Wednesday in another state, working with university students on that Friday in another state, coming home Saturday morning. I was at the event with high school students on Wednesday night when my agent called me and said, "Hey, Joaquin, I've got some bad news about the Friday event at the college in Washington State. The student organization that was bringing you in to work with these 20 students, they've had a little bit of a COVID uptick, and they want to push that event to next spring. Are you okay with that?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And it didn't really set on me that I was free. So I fly home Thursday morning, and as soon as I wake up, I think to myself, "Oh my God, I'm home tomorrow. I can go to the show. I don't have tickets, but I'm going to try and find some." So I found a couple of balcony seats online, and they were upper balcony because I'm a baller on a budget. and I called my daughter. My youngest daughter has always wanted to see Pearl Jam with me because I've been many times, but not with her. And she wanted, she said, next time, Dad, we're going to do this. And she thought I was going to be out of town too, so this was all kind of a surprise to her. And that's when I called her and said, hey, I got us a couple of cheap seats, but there's not a bad seat in that arena. You're going to love it. This is going to be a great show. We're going to see Pearl Jam tomorrow night. This is Thursday morning. And she says to me, oh my gosh, Dad, I've been planning my best friend's surprise birthday party tomorrow night for weeks since we weren't going to the show. And I'm throwing the whole thing for her. And I said, you're kidding me. And she said, no, I'm so sorry. So I walked next door because my wife had a work thing. She had to work that through the evening. It was a whole thing for her. So I walked next door to my best friend's house. My best friend is my next door neighbor, Paul. He's 75 years old and he's my best friend. He's just awesome. And I said to him, Paul, guess what you're doing with me tomorrow night? He said, what? And I said, we're going to see Pearl Jam. And he said, ooh, what is that? Rock and roll? And I said, yes, it's rock and roll, and you're going to love it. You're going to have the time of your life. And he said, all right, I'm in. And so that was going to be my day for the evening, my 75-year-old best friend, neighbor, Paul. And Thursday night, 10 p.m., I post on Facebook a picture of Ed. And I posted something like, I'm so excited that I get to go see Pearl Jam tomorrow. I wasn't going to be able to. Life is so wonderful. Can't wait to see him rock it tomorrow night in Fort Worth. And that's just what I posted, just a little thing. And Friday morning, day of show, I wake up and I get a Facebook message from a writer that I know in Southern California. I met her at a writer's conference. And she said to me, Joaquin, I saw your lovely post about going to see Pearl Jam last night. I took a photo of it because I'm really good friends with Ed's mom. And I sent her the photo. And I told her all the things you've been doing as a poet laureate in Dallas for youth poets and all the things you do traveling around the country, working with youth writers. And she sent back the loveliest little message. She said, oh my goodness, I hope my son gets to meet this poet man. And I thought it was so cool that Eddie Vedder's mom thought to say, I hope he gets to meet me. And that was how I woke up to this little message Friday morning. And I sat with that for about an hour till about 10 a.m. And then I thought to myself, I have an indirect line to Eddie Vedder. Like I can actually write something that I've always wanted to say to him and to the band for what their music's meant to me over the course of my entire, my life, over the last 30 years of my life. And this is my opportunity, So I'm gonna shoot my shot. So I wrote this thing, and the original version, by the way, was much longer. I realized, whoa, this is a long text I'm sending. So I tried to edit it down, and it is lengthy. The first version was like 10 minutes. And so I got it down to about a 4-minute thing, a letter poem of sorts. And I sent it to my friend, this writer I know. And people have been asking me for the writer's name. And I've been saying, I just don't want to say the writer's name because I don't want people to bombard that writer.
Of course.
With requests to meet Eddie's mom or what have you, or to link to. So I sent it to her and I said, could you just please forward this to Eddie's mom and see if she could pass it on to him? It's just something I wrote for him that I'd love for him to read. And that was it. I sent it to her and went about my day. And I asked my neighbor, Paul, is it cool if we go see the opening act? And he said, why don't we have a nice dinner? And we'll go right before Pearl Jam takes the stage. And I was like, oh, are you sure? And he's like, I'm an old man. I can't do that much concert in one night. And I said, okay. So I gave in to his wishes. And we were actually driving at 6:30 p.m. to go have a nice dinner. And I get a call from this writer that I know. Normally, I just get a Facebook message from her, but it was a call. And I picked it up. I was like, hey. And she goes, turn off your unrecognized phone call block on your phone for just a bit. Because if you get an unrecognized call in the next few minutes, answer it. That's all I have to say. Bye. And she hung up. And I do have unrecognized calls blocked on my phone. So I went to my settings and I turned the unrecognized call block off so I could get an unrecognized call. And about 10 minutes later, I get a phone call. And the voice says, hey, is this Joaquin? And I said, yeah, hi, this is Joaquin. And he goes, hey, I'm with the band management of Pearl Jam. My name's Mark. And Eddie got your note. And it really moved him. And he shared it with a band. And they were all really, really touched by what you wrote. and they wanted to thank you for writing that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it got to him. Please thank them for me, for even reading it. I was just so happy. And he goes, well, are you coming to the show tonight, Fort Worth? I said, yes, I am. Section 209, road G, or I'll be in the back, but I'll be yelling loud. Trust me, they'll feel my energy. And he said, well, we got you 2 seats on the front row of the lower balcony right beside the stage. And I said, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And he said, and if you come and be their guest, we'll leave those 2 tickets for you at will call, and Eddie's going to leave a note for you in with the tickets. And it's hard to see, but this is a note that Eddie left me with the tickets. It's the set
looks like the set list, yeah.
And there's a little notation that's handwritten that says, come to side stage now.
Oh,
wow.
And so we decide to scrap the dinner, and we just hustle to the show to get there as early as we can. And we walk in, and this note's at will call, and the tickets are at will call, and there's a side stage pass at will call. And we go to our seats, and after sitting down, someone from the band's management team comes over, and they're like, you're Joaquin, right? I said, yeah. And they said, so did you see the note from Eddie? And I said, yeah. And he said, you're going to want to come to side stage, but don't worry, I'm going to come and get you, and I'll walk you down there at that moment. I seriously thought he was going to just shout me out, like say, hey, we got a really nice poem letter from this guy named Joaquin. He's beside the stage. Y'all make some noise for him. Like, I thought that was going to be like, literally, that's all he was going to do was just say thank you. And by the way, the show, oh my gosh, it was a face melter. It couldn't have been any better. I've seen them a handful of times, and I think, of course, I want to say it was my favorite because I was on stage, but outside of that, it was such a beautiful show. Just the sound of it, that arena, there's something really nice about that arena in terms of the sound and just the way it's structured. There's not a bad seat in that arena. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful show. It was so energetic. It was so great. I know that they were fighting something, that Ed was fighting something, but the show was incredible. My neighbor Paul was having a good time. He was enjoying the music. And then they came and got me to walk me around to the side stage. And that's when it all happened. I just couldn't believe it. What happened. Just amazing.
I remember the moment, and, through technology, we're thankfully able to, due to the thousands of kind people that go out there and hold up their phones at shows, that we do get live streams that get streamed over on our Facebook. And we were thankful to get a full live show. I'm going to shout out Anthony because I believe this was Anthony's show that he did. And from what I can tell on the other side of it, it sounded like in that building that you could hear a pin drop.
Oh yeah.
That it was that while he was reading it, it was that dead silent that everybody knew over the first line or two that, oh, this is something deep from the heart.
Yeah, that was really powerful because, of course, whenever Eddie's speaking, there's energy and there's life force and people are just connected and with him. But within the first line, the first sentence, the first 10 seconds of what he read that I wrote, that's when the energy just clicked. And I've likened their shows in the past what I always thought church would feel like. It feels like what a true religious experience should be in terms of the connection to the humanity. And I don't know, it just felt like something sort of sacred in a way was happening, and we were all kind of leaning in. And I don't know if you've heard it, but I was overwhelmed by what was happening, but I was also overwhelmed by the fact that Ed's voice, his voice was quivering and he was super emotional, and that just moved me to tears just to know that he was really feeling, what I wrote. And like you said, it got to a point about 10 seconds into it where 13,000 people who were just dancing and singing and screaming and full of joy and light and energy and life were just listening, like listening to a friend intently, It was amazing.
That sounds incredible. And it's, the band does good by their fans. And I think we said the whole entire run of these 8 shows, what was supposed to be 9, was that this was really a tour that gave back the fan service, not only in songs, but in stories as well, and in requests and like fun little things. I mentioned the severed hand guy, I think off recording. I mentioned that, but like also like little other things. It's just interactions with people, and it felt, and going back, the Undone story, that was that night, and going
Yes.
back to, I believe, the first or second Minnesota show where somebody requested it, and
Yep.
then that's kind of bringing that whole thing back full circle. And and in times like that also, like, he kind of sees that there are people in this community that could either be grieving, that could be going through extremely difficult times, and I think he has the wherewithal to kind of see that and bring that to the table to share with everybody, because you just never know what everybody is going through and what they're keeping inside of them. And him reading what you had written, I think, could have hit home for so many people that were there. And I'm sure, there was not a dry eye in my house.
Mm.
That's for sure. I couldn't even fathom how it would have gone down. I remember, actually, we do a Zoom where a bunch of us get on the Zoom call. We all watch the live stream and we all comment and stuff like that. But when we realized what was going on, it was like six of us. We were all dead silent during it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I just remember that when he finished up and they got into a live, the only thing that I could say is that, well, that'll be a top 3 moment of the year.
And you talk about the effect that it had on the people there. That was, without question, after the show, the most time consuming walk to my car out of an arena, because I kid you not, over 100 people stopped me and said, "Joaquin, you were on stage. What you read, what he read, that was, you wrote, that it was like you were telling my story. Like, that was like the story of me and my dad." Or people were coming up to me just to say, "That was so beautiful. Thank you for writing that to him and making it a part of our show tonight." I live in Dallas and the show was in Fort Worth. I even had a family come up to me because I did a workshop at a preparatory school for young boys, and the family that was there with their young boys who I had taught a workshop at their school like a few weeks earlier. And Ed threw 2 tambourines to the 2 boys, and they asked me to autograph their tambourines and Sharpie. And just I was overwhelmed by, just because we all know, like, there's nothing like the Pearl Jam community. I mean, all bands have great fans, they really do. But I mean, like, I just think the connection and the shared humanity that happens at a Pearl Jam show, it's like nothing else in the world. And man, I was just overwhelmed by just light and just connection afterwards. It was, man, I found myself like talking to people, on my way to the car, and I was having conversation. I was crying, and they were crying, and it was just like, it was magic. It was absolute magic. It was funny because Ed, when it all happened, if you look at the video, Ed says we had at the first show, the Wednesday show, we had a NASA scientist, and I was like,
Amber, yeah.
I said, I wonder where he's going with this. And then he said, we're equally honored. I'm equally honored to have the first ever Dallas poet. And when he said Dallas poet, I was like, oh my gosh, Eddie Vedder is talking about me to these people. He's about, I think he's going to thank me. And then it turned into more than thanking me. It turned into him reading that piece and coming out. And after he read the piece, he starts walking toward me, and there's a beautiful man beside stage, because I'm just kind of like in shock, who gave me the most lovely, gentle push up the stairs. He's like pushing me to go up toward Eddie, and I'm like, okay. So I walk up the stairs and onto the stage, and I don't know if you can see it in the video, like, he just opens his arms and I open mine, and we just hug. Like, I just hugged this person whose music and art has meant so much to me, and that saved me. Like, I even put in the letter about, after my grandfather died, there were a few years where I was homeless, and I was fatherless, and I my mom was so young when she had me. She was busy being young, and I felt like I had no one, for a time in my life. And then because of that, I fell into a depression, and I talked about like sleeping outside, like at a park, and having my headphones and like always getting my hustle on to have batteries for my headphones so that I could play Pearl Jam. So I wasn't alone under a pavilion at midnight. I wasn't alone. I had that music with me. I had 10 with me, and I had Vitalogy with me, and like it was my saving grace. It was, so much of that music and lyrics and art that they gave me found its way into my own writing and my own poetry. And just, when he hugged me, I whispered something in his ear, and he whispered something back, and people have been asking me, what'd you whisper? And I was like, that's just for me. Like that moment I'm going to keep. I got to share a big moment with 13,000 people and everyone who saw it online, but I want to keep what I whispered into his ear and what he whispered back to me just for me.
That's personal. Understood.
Yeah. And he, and then he put, we kind of like, we're touching each other's arms, and he's, we're just sharing this moment, and the opening riff of Alive kicks in, and I'm standing on a stage as the opening riff of Alive kicks in, staring right at Eddie's face, and he's staring back at me, and we're both really emotional. And oh my God, it was just, I stepped back and let them just have the stage. And I just, I was dancing and bobbing my head, and I took my hair down, so it was kind of everywhere. And, but I'm also still crying a little bit because it was such a beautiful moment. And it was a kind of an overwhelming moment, and something I never thought I'd get to do. And I just feel so grateful that I got to do it, that I got to say thank you. You don't all get to do that.
If we learn something from this whole thing, I think there's one very important thing that we need to know. And I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just stating this as kind of a fact. It's that Ed loves his mother so much that if his mother during a tour is sending him something like this, he's going to stop and take notice and read it. There's a lot of things going on during Pearl Jam shows, backstage, before, after, it doesn't matter. There's so much that they have to worry about. Ed writes every single set list in calligraphy that it takes so much time. He has to figure out all the stuff, like he has to, obviously they got to eat, they got to get together and sound check. There's a lot of stuff that makes the magic happen. So if he got that message from his mom at like 2:00, then that is the prime territory of like, maybe he doesn't have his phone on him usually.
Exactly.
And
that's why I thought it was such a total shot in the dark, because I thought, you're right. Like there's a million balls in the air on that day, the day of the show. Yeah. And I can't believe it got to him. And I'm so grateful that it did.
Well, if people haven't had a chance to go back and read it, we do have it on our website on the Concertpedia page for that show. I highly recommend everyone go back and read it if you haven't seen the clip lately. But yeah, you mentioned it being on the side stage for Alive, and then what happens during Road? Are they like, come on, you got to come back out? Like, how did you get to show off your dance moves there?
The opening band came up, of course, and we're standing side stage because I think it was planned that they were going to come out and rejoice and dance and tambourine and play drums and as well. That I think they had that moment planned. So they come up and they are all thanking me for writing what I wrote, and they heard it backstage, and like we're sharing this kind of great moment, and it was sort of like house lights up for a moment. So having this conversation with them was really cool, and then of course the song kicks in, and they're ushered in by the person who gently pushed me up the steps, said to them, no, y'all got to go now, go. And they rush up, and Ed's throwing them tambourines, and everyone is singing on stage, and everyone's dancing. And I'm just kind of like dancing beside the stage. And I'm kind of, I don't know why, but I just kind of had my eyes on Eddie, like in this one moment of the song, and our eyes kind of lock. And I see him off mic go, Joaquin, come here, Joaquin, come here. And I'm not going to say no. So I ran up the steps, and as I'm running up, he goes, come here. And I don't think he wanted to throw me a tambourine for some reason. He just handed it to me. So he hands me this tambourine, and I just stepped back to the back. And I'm just trying to just enjoy the moment. I pulled out my phone and took some photos of me on stage with Eddie Vedder. I'll share those with y'all after this event, so you can look at those as well. Sure. And just kind of dancing and taking it all in. And I was kind of also like, my eyes were drawn to the fans on the behind the stage who had the spin the black bottle draped down, and the S had fallen off, and it's at that point it said pin the black circle. And so I was waving to them, and they were waving back, and I was just trying to take in everything that I could, because I realized I'm never going to have this moment again. Like, this is a once in a lifetime moment to just kind of look around and see it all. So even though I was dancing a lot, I was still kind of just like taking it all in and looking at faces and watching them watch the stage, because it was such a weird vantage point to be from. And that was awesome. Seeing the faces watch the band from that perspective was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And then I noticed that they were all harmonizing together and got to a chorus and whatnot. And then I look over and I just caught Ed again, and he goes, and he's pointing to us like on this mic. And so I just run up there full speed and get on right in time for the chorus. And it's funny, my neighbor Paul, who filmed it, he said to me, you stepped away dramatically and came back and sang again. He said, you look like you've been doing this forever. He goes, I was so proud of you. You look like a real rock star up there. And
he gave you another shout out during the song. He yelled your name. I think I was right when you Joaquin, like he was yelling for you. Hear it in the song. Yeah.
And so I ended up rocking in the free world, on the stage for Rocking in the Free World. And I couldn't believe it. And I haven't danced that hard in a long time, and it felt great to dance on stage with the band, and it felt great to be able to. The first thing I did when I ran on was I just, like, after Ed handed me the tambourine, I bumped him, I fist bumped him, and then I went to each band member, except Matt, who's busy drumming, and they like came away from the guitar or the bass for a moment, Stone and everybody, and Jeff and dapped me. And even when I finished dancing and came off and they closed the show out, they were so kind, because as they were walking off the upper rail to go immediately backstage, I was still kind of right there below them, below the rail they walked on, but like within arm's reach. And I kind of had my fist out to bump them each one last time to thank them. As they were bumping my fist, I was saying, thank you so much. And Jeff stopped short, and he said, because as I bumped him, he said, it's so cool that you're a poet laureate. And I said, thank you so much. And he said, I got a friend who's the poet laureate of Montana. I need to connect you to. I need to connect you to. And I said, yes, do. And he ran off. So, and that's what's really crazy is the show ends and I'm standing beside the stage, and I can see the sort of ushering of a select few fans back to maybe have a moment with Ed and the band. It's what it looked like or maybe it was family members or something. I don't know, but there was this little congregation of 4 or 5 people who went backstage, and I thought to myself, maybe I should go backstage. Maybe I'm supposed to meet the band too, just to say thank you again. But then I saw them go, and I thought, I don't know why. I just thought to myself, I have been given so much. Like, this was such a gift for me. I don't know that I need any more than I've been given already. So I want to let whoever's going back there have that moment. And I'm going to go check on my 75-year-old friend who's sitting on the lower balcony first row for the last 30 or 40 minutes, make sure he's okay, and check on him and call it a beautiful night. And that's what I did.
Let me tell you, for my money, and we've watched quite a lot of Pearl Jam shows in my lifetime, next to one person who I'll explain in a second, you were the happiest person that I've ever seen on a Pearl Jam stage. There have been a lot of people, and not as many as you think, because obviously band members excluded. You know, sometimes you get the opener band and other guys like that come on, and very rarely do you get a fan or somebody that's in your position that got a shout out to come on stage and interact like that. But you couldn't wipe the smile off your face. I love you weren't just dancing. You were from stage to stage, and you're right. You took advantage of the whole thing. You went up to every guy, and it was like, you can live vicariously through that and be like, that is the Pearl Jam fan moment right there. That is what we all kind of dream of. We all dream that Ed one day would recognize us for doing something that we feel like is important, and then go on stage, give him a big hug and dance.
Absolutely.
Nothing better than that.
I talked to a young poet from Dallas not too long ago who's thinking of applying to be the next Dallas Poet Laureate. And I was like, yes, you absolutely should. And the other day she contacted me and she said, so wait, Joaquin, are you telling me that if I become the next Dallas Poet Laureate, I'm going to get to dance on a stage with Beyonce and hug her and high five her and she'll hand me a tambourine? And I said, I can't promise that. I
You
cannot
set the bar very high.
I said,
Yeah.
I said, just be kind and do good, and good things come back to you if you try and be kind and good. And that's my motto.
That's incredible. By the way, the other happiest person, and this has kind of become an inside joke within the podcast last week or so. There's a show in Melbourne 2003 where a fan jumps right onto the stage during Do the Evolution, and he could have gotten taken out by security, but Ed's like, no, we handle this. And all he did with Ed that whole entire time was dance, sing, have him on his shoulders, and it was. I'll send you a video clip once we're
Please do.
done here. It's incredible. I didn't even know about this moment until like a week or two ago.
Wow.
Like just because it's Australia and we're in the States and it just doesn't get talked about in our circles as much. But I mean, that's a guy we need to find for the next interview. You know what I mean? But you know, you said it before we started talking. I asked you like, how's it been waking up every day in the afterglow of this? So can you talk a little bit about that? Just like,
Absolutely.
you said your wife was like, what's this face for?
Exactly. My wife, ever since the show she's just like stopped me in the kitchen or, out of the car or in the grocery store. And she's turned to me and she's like, you're still doing it, right? And I said, what am I still doing? And she goes, you're still smiling. You haven't stopped smiling since Pearl Jam. She goes, you do know that, right? And I said, yes, I know. I'm sorry. I'll try and control this smile as much as I can. And then she pulled me aside and she's like, look, I mess with you a lot. She goes, but I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in that moment with you. But she said to me, I'm so overjoyed that you got to experience that, because she's like, I know what their music means to you. And I know that you've told me before that my wife has a big Bjork thing. She's a big Bjork person. She's like, I know that the way I talk about Bjork's music is sort of what you've talked with me about Pearl Jam's music, that it was all, it's almost like they were telling your story in a way. And for you to be able to thank them, she's like, as much as I mess with you about smiling, I understand this is going to be a thing for a few months. She's like, I get it. You'll stub your toe on the couch or something in a few months and you'll come back down to earth. But she's like, keep floating for now. Keep floating for now.
How about
how did you
ahead.
break it to the family the next day? Like, obviously they didn't know all this happened such last minute. The next morning you just like text them all a YouTube link, like, just so you guys know, here's what happened.
Yeah, I wanted to specifically ask about your daughter, actually.
The first person I reached out to was my daughter. The first person I reached out to was my daughter. Right after the show, I got into the car and Paul, my neighbor, was saying, let's go efficiently so we can beat the line. I said, oh, give me 1 second. I've got to text one person and that's it. Then we'll go. And I texted my daughter and I said, I don't want you to find out on YouTube. I don't want you to find out from a stranger. But I just sang and danced with Eddie Vedder on stage. It's not a joke. It happened. I don't want you to be upset. I don't want you to feel unhappy. I know you had a great night at the birthday party. I know you did a great thing for your friend. Trust me. We're going to go to a show. It's going to be magical. We're going to dance our butts off. We're going to feel connected with 15,000 other people, and you're going to get to experience it with me. Don't feel bad. I love you. Don't feel bad. And sure enough, she got my message the next morning. She called me and she was like, 2 people sent me something before I got your message. She goes, I'm so happy for you, Dad. So she was actually great about it. I was a little partly relieved that she wasn't heartbroken that she didn't get to be a part of it. Because when they asked Paul to come down to the side stage, he was like, no, I want no part of that. I guarantee my daughter would have been on that stage with a tambourine in her hand, because there's no way she would have let me dance without her on that stage. So, but we'll have our chance. There's plenty of Pearl Jam shows in the future.
Absolutely. Yep. I want to know a little bit about like your Pearl Jam fandom before this, though, because there's obviously you said this goes back to 10 Vitalogy. Well, Tell us a little something. Tell us about how you figured out that you were huge into this band. What songs resonated with you? Like, tell a little bit about it.
I think for me, I mentioned the fact that that my father, in the letter, I mentioned the fact that my father left the year I was born, and I know who my father is. I've always known his name. I've always known that he lived in a town an hour away or whatever. But it always felt like there was like this ocean between us. And I don't know why that was, but I was a child and it's just how I felt, even though, I'd been told he lives, an hour away in this, suburb beyond a suburb of Dallas. It still just felt like a world away from me. And music was something that I channeled and to sort of just help me cope with my pain. And I remember being about 19 and 10 had just dropped. And for whatever reason, I think I was with a friend of mine and they had just put in this, they had the CD in the car. And I'd been wanting to hear this whole album in its entirety, but they had already like played it. And it was at a point near the end of the album and of the CD. And it was going right into release. Like it was going right into release. And like, this is me hearing 10, hearing this album, hearing release for the first time in my life. And the words, like just the words, it was like I was hearing my story. It was like I was hearing my pain. It was like I was hearing that ocean of distance between me and another person that I don't know, should be worlds closer, that were worlds apart from each other. And I remember just like crying. I remember weeping the first time I heard release, and I felt released. I felt like, how beautiful is it to know that here's this man who through his art and lyrics and this band, their musicianship and their musicality, could connect with me and make me think about my dad and think about that distance and feel heartbroken, but in a sense, in a way, feel a little heart mended at the same time, that someone could put something together that was in a way so tragic, but in a bigger way, so beautiful. To me, it's the most beautiful song I've ever heard, even to this day. I remember when I saw them at Wrigley and they opened with release. Like they walked out and went right in, and I just started crying. I couldn't control myself. I just started crying. The person next to me was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yes, it's just this song, this song." And I go way back, and this song saved me in a very real way. And then going into the album, I feel like a lot of the early lyrics that Ed was writing were very father and son driven. What do you think about that? Do you think that there's something to that? The early work, the first few albums, having sort of that distance depicted?
Yes, I do. I think from when the Mama San was written, because he had been in a band, Bad Radio, and they were kind of like very closer to Red Hot Chili Peppers than, something that Stone and Jeff had wanted to do was kind of turn into more of the artsy band like Jane's Addiction. And when he was given the tape by Jack Irons, it seems that all these thoughts and feelings about his life that maybe, I don't know if he had expressed them. I don't know. We don't know that deep into it. And honestly, it's not for us to know. What is for us to know is what was recorded and put on the album. But it seemed like that day he went surfing and knew exactly what he wanted to say. And it was the right time to tell that story. And you have, I think that I've always thought that the tie-ins with Alive and Release just put the album so well together. Like it bookends it so well. It's the story of like finding it out and then like trying to almost send a message to his father, like, because he knows at that moment, like, here I am, I'm in the studio, like, and this all happened within barely months. This all happened so quickly, and he has to be thinking to himself, like, well, would you be proud of me in this moment? I would never know from the situation that I'm in right now, but I need to at least ask. And I think it comes back a lot on Earthlings. I think there's sort of a thematic way that Earthlings ties together Invincible all throughout into the ending track On My Way. And I think a lot of that are again messages to his father about things that he's learned, about like just life and the beauty of life, fragility of life, which is a huge theme, not just in Pearl Jam, but with Ed in general. And I think that finally there is a little bit of, at the end of that record where you hear his father's voice for the first time. I think that it does come full circle with all that. And it feels like that is almost, again, no pun intended, but a release of that whole thing. Like I hear his voice, and although I can't see him, I can't touch him, I know he's there.
You talk about the impact of the music on me as as it relates to what I wrote Ed in the note and the band in the note, and as it relates to me as a person discovering music and discovering my own pain through and my own healing through the music of Pearl Jam. But I mentioned to you off air that right after it's so funny that I got released first before live. Half an hour later, I experienced live for the first time. After hearing the beautiful release, I hear the angst filled alive and the beautiful angry rejoicing of life. And that album informed a poem that I wrote when I was 19, the first draft of a poem. And as more work came out of the years, I would go back to that poem and mutate it a little more. And every once in a while, I'll get the opportunity to do that poem. It's called Family Tree. And it's about my mother, but it's to my father. Because I never really have written anything to both of them or for both of them, because when I think of my mother and my father, I always think of them that way, as my mother and my father. I always say there's always a distance between those two words when I speak it. Whereas a lot of people say, hey, my mom and my dad. It's like they're one being,
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I'll get to, and that poem's morphed over the years, but I don't know why, but early on when I would do it at an open mic, I would always frame that, I would say about the poem, I would say, this is a poem that I wrote, but it's framed by two pieces of poetry by Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder. So it's framed by a song called Release. So you're going to hear the big, a little bit of it here and a little bit of it there from my voice. And then my poem's going to be in the middle. And if you want to hear the rest of the song Release after you hear my poem, you should go find it and you should listen to it, because it will make you a better human being. It will, every time you listen to their work, you become a better human being. And so I get to do that, every once in a while. And when I do that poem, and still to this day, I like to preface it with that and frame it with that, with just a little piece of Release here and a little piece of Release there. And it ends up always being a cathartic moment for me as a poet on a stage, sharing that story of me and my father. It's sort of framed by this other story of Ed and his.
And from there, like, you have to think a lot of Ed's influences and a lot of things that he takes away from the music he's heard before him and into Pearl Jam, like The Who. That's a huge, everybody knows is influenced by The Who and a ton of other artists, but I'm thinking about The Who and just that specifically, that he can take a little something from there. And then what he brings to the table, if somebody can take something from that influence from him and bring it into something that they're passionate about too, that means the music, I don't want to say the music had worked, but the music had spread.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that is the separation between music and art.
I love it. You're so right. I had an event today here in Nebraska, and I was working with two teachers, and one was in her 40s and one was in her early 20s. And we were talking about this moment. She's like, I saw on your Facebook, what happened? And we were talking about the Pearl Jam moment. And she was telling me like how much Pearl Jam's music means to her and her husband. And the 23-year-old teacher, who's sort of a mentee of this woman, has said to me, I got introduced to Pearl Jam through her. And so the music it's continuing to change lives because we're passing it on. And my daughter, who was going to go to that show, she's 20 and she's young, and I'm passing Pearl Jam on to her, and I'm hoping that she'll do the same for her someday daughter, pass Pearl Jam on to her as well, because she knows. My daughter Dakota has even said to me, when I listen to their music, Dad, I understand why you connect with it. I understand why you connect with it. And that's something I think we get to pass on. That's a beautiful thing. I'm sure you both pass it on to your children and your partners and your friends. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, when we're not listening to Bolivia music, sure.
Didn't they cover "Let It Snow" at a show a year ago, or maybe
Let It Go
from Frozen?
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you about started writing poetry. Obviously, poetry and song lyrics have a lot in common, but they also are very different. Lyrics can be you have to follow this form, and there's music, and you have this formula, and poetry can be a little bit more free. But what kind of influence did like lyrics have on your poetry? Do you sometimes write and you think of like, this flows like a song? Do you sometimes hear music? Like, have you ever written music have you ever written lyrics for music? What's the correlation been like for you? How do those things kind of fit together?
I truly believe music's written in lines and poetry's written in lines. Like, someone asked me one time, what's the tool of the poet? Like, what tools do you have at your disposal? Like, I know what a carpenter does. I know there are tools. What is a poet? And I told them, really the only tool we have is the line. That's it. Because some poems have really long lines and some have really short lines and some have lines that rhyme and they don't. Like, a poem can be this and it can be that, but it has to be written in the line. Even those ones that look like perfect squares, I know poets who do that, they ache over where to create that square so that the line falls where they want it to fall, because every line is a movement of thought. It's a movement from this word at the end is so important. That's why I'm accentuating the line at the end with it. Or this word at the beginning is so important. That's why I'm accentuating the beginning with it. Or maybe they're cross-pollinating with one another, and that's why they're at the end and the beginning. So great poets ache over their line breaks, the way that great musicians ache over writing a line of music, a line of sheet music. And I've dabbled over the years with the occasional country western song. I'm a big Johnny Cash fan, and I have another friend who's another poet, and here we are. I'm a brown poet from Dallas, and he's a black poet from Dallas, and we both like to occasionally write the occasional country western song. I don't know why we do, and we'll share lyrics with each other, but it's really just more for fun than anything else. And he's actually an accomplished musician. He's a piano player, and so like he'll take some of the things I write and just pick up a guitar and like start picking and put it to music. But I remember I was at a conference once, and it was a sort of a university showcase conference where like the people who travel to universities are going to showcase their talents at this conference to hopefully you'll book us to come to your university. And of course, I'm a spoken word poet there, and I'm doing poetry, and there are comedians in the back room waiting with me. And there's also some musicians who have their acoustic guitar with them. And I was back in the green room with this one gentleman. I forget his name. Country western singer, was going to be touring universities, and he was writing and he was picking and he was singing very softly aloud, and he was stuck. He was like, and then he exasperated some frustration. He was like, "Arg, man, I wish I could finish this line, but I had heard him repeat it a few times. And I said to him, what about, and then I said a line, and he went, damn, that's really good. And I said, you can have it. It fits with the metrical quality of what you just said. And I hope thematically it fits with the heartbreak you were just talking about, because I felt heartbreak, and that's what I would have said next. And I don't know if that song anything ever became of that song, but that was my one brush with with like real songwriting for a moment in the green room of a National Association of Campus Activities conference with a young man who had a passion for country music.
But it is true that all poets want to be rock stars and all rock stars want to be poets.
That is exactly true. And my wife said the same thing. She's like, I see you up on stage trying to be a rock star with Eddie Vedder. She says, remember, you're a poet. Remember, you got to take out the trash in a couple of days. So that's what I love about my wife. She keeps me grounded and keeps me humbled. I can dance on stage with Eddie Vedder, but I can always count on her to ground my feet on the earth and get my head out of the clouds.
It always happens. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't want to end the conversation, so I got like one, just overarching thing that I'd like to talk about, and that's just like your show intake. And you can tell, right when you said, "Oh, I went to Wrigley and saw the show in Wrigley," that you will travel for this band. It's not just when they come to me; it's you go to them, and that's how you know that a band and the music is so important to you that you will drop everything you're doing and you'll go across country, across, international. So how many shows have you been to? And like, what have been some of your, like, obviously outside of Fort Worth, some of your favorites?
I will say this early on in my Pearl Jam experience. When I first got the CD 10, I borrowed money from a friend to buy it, and I had to pay him back eventually. Early on, like in those first few albums, like I was busy grinding. I was busy like trying to survive, and so my show experience has been like over the last 15 years instead of the first 15, just because I'm in a position in life where like I can go to shows. I can there was a time in my life where I was like, I need to buy food, and and like that was my priority. But the funny thing is I travel for work, like which is a good and bad thing. Like sometimes it'll put me in Chicago, and oh my gosh, I'm done at 4 with this thing I have to do to university, and they're here at Wrigley. I can set this up. I can make it. Have a friend I can go with. I know a poet I know in Chicago. We'll have a great time, and that's actually happened a handful of times, like 5 or 6 times. Like work has taken me to a show, like 5 or 6 shows right there, just by like work taking me there, and just feeling lucky to be able to go. Outside of that happening, because my life as a touring artist, and I'm the guy who says yes to everything, because I want to teach people about poetry and I want to teach creative writing. And so I keep a pretty crazy, hectic schedule. And I now have an agent that keeps me busy during the summer with youth leadership camps. Like, who knew there was a youth leadership camp every week of the summer? I didn't know, but my agent has known for years. And so like my time is so limited, but I would say between the 5 or 6 shows that I've just been in, there and ended up being able to take in a show at, I've been able to seek out probably another 7 or 8 on my own. Just I'm going to carve out because I really want to go to this show. I would say probably a dozen, which is not nearly as many as I would love to have gone to, but
it's never as many, right?
It's time, and it's life, and daughters, and soccer games, and so many things in life pulling you in a lot of different directions. But God bless the Pearl Jam fans who find a way to travel with this band. I think it's incredible. Ed in Fort Worth called out a guy who was like into the last 6 shows or something. Hey, I see you again. Like, there you are. It's amazing, and they're grateful for it. And the moment in the Fort Worth show that was also really special for me was just the shout out, like the him shouting out some dedications. Like, I told my wife about this, and what my wife said? She said, "What other band does that? Like, what other huge pop or rock or country band will stop a show and read like, hey, it's this person's birthday, or hey, it's this person's wedding anniversary, or hey, this person has come to their 20th show and they wanted to," like, who does that? And for me, like, moments like that, like you said, there are moments where someone will come on stage, or moments where like me being pulled up, that are really magical, that I truly don't think happens anywhere else outside of the Fort Worth show being what it was for me. I think that Wrigley show, because of the fact they opened with Release, and also because, I don't know if you remember, like it rained.
Oh, I was there.
Yeah, it
I
rained
remember.
really, really bad for a moment there. And then they were fighting. I think there was like a noise restriction time limit or something that they
Yeah.
were fighting and had to like just do the show. The show must go on.
Fish had a concert in Chicago the same night. And let's just say, I guess Pearl Jam was a lot friendlier with the local Chicago government than Fish was.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Or
that show,
just well more respected, I guess.
Yeah, they did not
that
get to
show
play
was
till 3 a.m. or whatever it was. Yeah.
No, that show will stay with me always, and the Forward show will stay with me always, and every show that I've been to, there's a moment in it that just strikes a chord in you. And I'm a journal guy. Like I journal a lot. I like to write about my day, and like I'll sometimes go back and it'll just be like one particular song in a show, just kind of the way Eddie sang it, you know, like his voice was so strong in this particular song or what have you, or the band was for whatever reason on another level for this particular song, and I don't think there's such a thing as a bad Pearl Jam show. I think that's what's great about being a fan of theirs is that you stumble into something miraculous just about every show, even if it's just a song or a moment. Something miraculous is going to happen.
100%. That's why you do it. That's why we do it. That's why everybody that tuned into this, that's why we all do it, and we all love it, and it is soothing for the soul.
Absolutely.
So
thank you both so much for talking to me tonight.
Oh, thank you.
It's an
No,
incredible
thank
story.
you. I coming out of that, like I didn't even think. One of my friends, I guess, saw your post the day after, and he tagged me, and he's like, "Well, would you want to get him on the show?" And there's so much going on in my mind at the time, mainly that two things: that I had COVID, and I could potentially be moving out of my house, and so I wasn't even thinking in terms of like, oh, let's get him for an interview. And usually I would. That's something I'm usually on top of. So I got to give a shout out to Brian Anderson for that. And once he said something like, I'm on it. I'm on it. Yes. Mainly just because I wanted to be able to tell your story and have you be able to tell your story and share it with everybody else, because stories are no good if you don't tell anybody. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You're a poet. I don't have to tell you any of that.
Well, thank you both so much. Y'all have a fantastic night.
You too, man.
Go check out Joaquin's books. He's published. He's I think he's got a new thing coming out next year, so definitely check that out.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. I believe next week's episode is the Ohana Encore episode, so get ready and excited for that. I know a lot of you remember that only being 2 years ago, so a lot of the memories will be fresh. We'll be sharing that with you guys, along with our good friend Dakota, who will be telling his story. So until then, we will see you next time. Thanks all.
My mom was 17 when she had me, but she was younger and more rebellious and more beautiful than most 17-year-olds can be at that age. So she was busy being young and rebellious and beautiful on the streets of our city, Dallas, when I was a child, a young person. For this reason, she was in and out of my life. I don't fault her for that. I love my mother very much, and I get it. I was once young and beautiful too. My father left the year I was born, and he never came back. It was because of all of this that I was raised by my abuelo, grandfather. He was my mother, and my father, and my grandfather, and my teacher, and my everything. When I was 14, he died in a car accident. I became homeless. More importantly, it was the first time in my life, my young life, that I felt fatherless. I spent most nights bouncing around from place to place. Many nights sleeping under the concrete pavilions at Tootsie Park in Old East Dallas. But I was never alone, because the sound of the voice and the music of Pearl Jam was with me in my headphones, reminding me that the pain I was feeling wasn't rage at the universe for taking my grandfather from me, but a hurting from the fact that I had all the love in the world inside of me and nowhere to put it. Pearl Jam's music made me strong, made me whole, made me realize that music and art and poetry, these are the things that we live and breathe and die for. Your music reminded me that I was alive. So thank you for creating that art and music and poetry. It saved me in every way a person can be saved. I will be forever grateful to you.